Are we still good? So quiet. All right, let's start. Hi, welcome to all of you here, to our audience in person, our audience on Zoom, and our audience on our live stream on Instagram. I'm Anna. I'm a faculty at the MA in Social Design. Before that, I was a frequent guest and also an alumni. And today, I'd like to borrow a concept from witnessing ceremonies of Native Americans. And so I stand before you as a bearer of stories of what I've witnessed this past year. In our community, I saw solidarity and support in action, whether it's for each other or for our own community, for our community partners. I heard words of affirmation for each other, mixed with a healthy dose of self-doubt that fueled all of us to just keep going and to do better. In short, I witnessed budding mission-driven social designers relentless in pursuit of impact. So with that, we'd like to acknowledge that we are on stolen land. Baltimore stands on ancestral, unceded lands of the Piscataway, the Susquehannock tribes. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. And trade and migration brought the Lumbee and the Cherokee tribes here. We settled and colonized this land using enslaved labor from African Americans. This acknowledgement is a small first step for the marathon we have to do to repair the historical injustices we've inherited. So now I'm going to pass it on to Thomas.
Thank you, Anna. Hi. Good evening and welcome to the 2024 Social Design Exchange. I'm Thomas Gardner, Director of the MA in Social Design graduate program here at MICA. While some may drift towards media, commercial design, or fashion, others are trying to understand what we can contribute to substantive questions, and not necessarily through self-sacrificing service or through clinical problem-solving, condescension, or pseudo-populism. Maybe invented terms don't help, but I think some of us want to be part of a contemporary life that is post-ideological and constructive. So how do we proceed? As artists, architects, designers, social designers, citizens, what are we supposed to do? And how do we learn to speculate creatively in a conjectural way? I'd like to offer as an ethical premise for the work and the pedagogy that social design is a reparative practice, while seeking an extension of three conditions and preoccupations and drivers: place-based and site-specific, collaborative and co-designed, project-based and tangible. Circling around this is the big question emerging across so many conversations about AI and work, namely, what are our core capabilities as humans? We seek to offer our abilities to effectively communicate, develop empathy, and think critically to collaborate, adapt, innovate, and implement. In our studios, students deal with reality, actual people, authentic situations. We see design not as a way to distance ourselves from the arbitrary forces that shape contemporary society, but as a way to reimagine it. Ultimately, I'm asking, is there a way to combine a radical critique with a constructive program of action? Because one without the other is no longer sufficient. We're here tonight to honor, celebrate, and bear witness to the dedicated efforts of the MICA social design graduate students. In addition to the capstone work you'll see shortly, some of our major project partners this year have included the Sanaa Center and Black Arts District in West Baltimore, the redevelopment of Avenue Market, the fantastic folks at Share Baltimore, a consortium of community land trusts dedicated to a more affordable city for all, and our continuing work with the Equity-Centered Pipeline Initiative, a collaboration with Morgan State University, which seeks to develop equity-centered leaders in K-12 schools. For these past months, I'm supposed to be clicking slides. Okay, let's start over. Just kidding. For these past months, the students have been working with their own community partners and at a variety of scales, scopes, and contexts, geographies, localities, and demographies, to understand and address complex problems while focused on the role design plays as a positive socio-political catalyst. These projects conjure visions and realities for a better life, one that's possible now and in the future. Let's do
it. Hi, I'm Meredith, also known as Mare by some, Mary by others, Murphy by my family, and Meredith Lynn when my mom was with us. So tonight I'm going to be examining. Oops. Sorry, I should have played my video first, guys. I'm going to introduce myself again.
What is restorative justice? Rooted in traditional indigenous practices, restorative justice is grounded in the concept of repairing harm. The practice facilitates dialogue within the community and fosters healing and harmony for those who have harmed, and been impacted by harm. By bringing together all involved, restorative justice practices address conflict, understand its impact, and work toward resolution. All the while emphasizing accountability, empathy, and dialogue. Today, RJ processes can be found in such places as schools, neighborhoods, workplaces, and carceral settings. It focuses on a shift in mindset from one that is punitive to one that is more restorative. It reframes typical punitive questions by asking what happened, who was affected, and what can be done to repair the harm and make things right. Restorative justice practices have been implemented within the city of Baltimore for over 30 years, making it one of the top 3 cities in the country renowned for its RJ work. While these practices have decades-long roots in Baltimore, it is frequently dismissed by community members. Join me as I seek to answer the question, how might we amplify community investment in restorative justice practices?
So as I already said, I'm Meredith, and tonight I'll be examining community investment in restorative justice practices. In January 2022, I was first introduced to restorative justice practices. While employed by the County of Camden, I was tasked with assisting the county's Youth Services Commission in its implementation of a restorative justice hub in the city of Camden, New Jersey. As I began to immerse myself in the subject, I was immediately intrigued. It presented a perspective that went beyond the punitive methods of our current legal system in addressing harm and conflict. Becoming exposed to this shift in mindset ignited my excitement. Driven by this newfound passion, I felt compelled to explore this practice more deeply. I sought to experience it beyond the confines of a governmental agency. This led me to ask myself how I could expand my research while incorporating creativity and restorative justice. This is where I found MICA's social design program. I was thrilled by the idea of combining human-centered design and restorative work. Additionally, MICA being located in Baltimore, a city renowned for its restorative justice initiatives, it called to me. This is the story of my journey. When I came into the program, I wasn't sure of the direction I wanted to go. I knew I wanted to focus on RJ work in Baltimore, but was stuck as to how my pathway would look. After mind mapping, a process I was not a fan of in the beginning, I must admit, and countless talks with my professors, I found my starting point. I approached my project with the goal of examining the landscape of restorative justice work in Baltimore. I was interested in who was doing the work, how they were doing the work, and any barriers they may have been facing. From there, I eagerly began my research. I studied theory and statistics, searching for different modalities being practiced and the outcomes produced. I had the privilege of connecting with and interviewing prominent restorative justice practitioners within the city. I was also fortunate to interview Baltimore residents regarding their views on RJ practices. It was at this stage that I realized that there was so much more to restorative justice than what I thought I knew. During my resident interviews, I heard things like, restorative justice is a method going forward, taking into account the present and future that is in a way, hopefully, equitable. To restore something is to step away from the old ways of politics and bring forth some new ideas. Everything has to have a restoration period because it's not as useful as it once was. The need to get to the root of issues, taking into account people's mental and spiritual states and where they are in life at the moment. Without addressing these topics, restoration can't begin. After weeks of research, I began piecing together what I had learned. I realized there was a common misconception permeating the landscape of RJ work. Practitioners talked of a lack of community interest and understanding regarding restorative justice practices. Barbara Sherrod from Restorative Response Baltimore noted, restorative justice requires a paradigm shift, and it's one that many people aren't interested in nor prepared for. Baltimore resident Darius Sanders commented, restorative justice to me is a myth. I think we spend a lot of time talking about it, conceptually speaking. I think it's good to talk about it, but if it were something that were applied, I think that the results of it would be a lot more visible. Digging further, I noticed something interesting. Common misconceptions regarding restorative justice were a driving force behind community disinterest. Here, I will share with you some of the questions around the practice. I will also share some answers. Isn't restorative justice about forgiveness? Forgiveness is not required, nor is it expected. The focus of the process is repairing the harm caused. Forgiveness may at times be an unintentional outcome. However, it is never the end goal. Isn't it just an easy way out for the person who caused harm? In short, no. Our current punitive system runs on passivity. Restorative justice is an active process. It requires accountability, and accountability is difficult. It is active, rigorous, and demands the full humanity of people who have committed harm. I don't see the results, so it must not be working. RJ presents itself in decreasing school suspensions in Baltimore City schools since 2016, a drop in Baltimore City juvenile complaints over a 10-year period, reduced recidivism rates, and overall satisfaction expressed by people harmed. So, how might we amplify community investment in restorative justice practices? At this time, I find myself somewhere between the ideation and prototyping stages of my design project. Armed with my findings, I have partnered with Restorative Response Baltimore for my capstone. I am in the process of designing a campaign that aims to gain community interest in restorative justice. Be More Together is a campaign that focuses on debunking the myths surrounding restorative justice and aims to shed light on its true essence of healing and reconciliation. Although my design process is still in the early stages, I wanted to share some of the ideas I had that will coincide with the campaign. Infographics that focus on dispelling RJ myths, a pamphlet that expands upon the points made in the infographics, an online and print directory that compiles all of the RJ practitioners in Baltimore and how they approach their work. And also restorative justice themes events to take place during Restorative Justice Week in November 2024. In addition to the Be More Together campaign, I am also working with Restorative Response Baltimore on a revised job description for their volunteer ambassadors. This revision will rely on the principles of human-centered design when created. And going forward, beyond MICA, I will continue with the design of the Be More Together campaign. I will also begin further work into other issues I found during my research stages. These issues include where my role as a white woman best fits within restorative spaces, as well as further examining the monetization and cottage industry of restorative work. If you would like to know more about me and the work I've been doing here at MICA, please come see me at the reception following the design exchange or contact me at the email on the screen. I would like to thank my family, friends, cohort, and community partners who helped make my work possible. And I would also like to thank all of you for being here tonight.
Being officially outlawed in 1968, the shadow of redlining still persists, with low-income neighborhoods continuing to face challenges like poverty and property tax reduction. These obstacles have a direct impact on educational opportunities available to residents. For example, in Baltimore, college enrollment rates are markedly different across socioeconomic backgrounds, with 83% of students from affluent families attending college, in stark contrast to only 51% from low-income families. There's a crucial insight, though. Talent is distributed uniformly across all demographics. The potential for excellence is universal, irrespective of one's background. The disparity lies in the opportunities available to nurture this talent. Access to education, resources, mentorship, and supportive environments are all crucial in unlocking individuals' potential. Statistics reveal that children from wealthier families are significantly more likely to become inventors due to exposure. Those from the top 1% income bracket are 10 times more likely to invent than those from families with below median income. Furthermore, racial and gender disparities are evident in the field of innovation, with white people being over 3 times more likely to become inventors than Black people, and 82% of inventors being men. Yet, research also indicates that broadening access to innovation for underrepresented groups can dramatically increase innovation rates. Nonprofits like Makerspaces are stepping up, allowing people to engage with and unleash their potential. Makerspaces encourage hands-on experimentation and innovation, providing valuable learning experiences, problem-solving opportunities, and developing essential skills for the modern workforce. So, in order to democratize the opportunity to innovate, the question arises: how might we expand maker networks to provide broader access to adult learners?
Thank you. Thank you for everybody that came out tonight. Your support really means the world to everyone here at MASD. Hello, my name is Sydney Howell. I'm a designer, researcher, and more importantly, a maker. Before I get started, I would like to acknowledge the privilege I hold as someone who has access to higher education and how it can inadvertently perpetuate inequalities within the educational system. As a designer, I aim to embody 3 key design principles. The universal right to learn and grow. I believe that everybody has the right to access learning opportunities. Redefining success by shifting focus from capital gain to personal growth, and by fostering community by encouraging any and all forms of collaboration. Welcome. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of my capstone, I wanted to tell you guys about somebody truly remarkable. He's not your typical straight A student who aims for Ivy League schools, although I'm sure he could if he wanted to. His intelligence comes from, his intelligence comes from curiosity. He has always had an innate desire to understand how things work, so he tinkered, took things apart, put them back together, just to see what made him tick. And when his curiosity really kicked in, he'd create his own stuff. He's what I would like to call a maker. What made him even more impressive, though, was his kindness and willingness to share his knowledge with others, or with anyone who would listen, including myself. He developed and continues to create his own Makers Network, where he shares his knowledge just simply out of his love for learning and sharing. This extraordinary individual's name is Chris Howell, but to me, he is simply Dad. In a world where the wealth gap between the top 10% and the rest of society is widening at an alarming rate, and low income and underrepresented demographics often face limited access to education, resources, and opportunities to innovate, wouldn't we all benefit from networks like Chris's? Thankfully, Chris is not alone. There's a whole makers movement encompassing a growing community of individuals who actively participate in creative production and share their process and products with others. While it was not initially intended for education, educators swiftly recognized its potential to transform learning opportunities. Research suggests that individuals who engage in making learn through a variety of approaches, including hands-on experimentation, independent inquiry, and collaborative problem solving. Maker networks foster iterative learning, allowing individuals to test and redefine their ideas as they progress. At its heart, making empowers individuals to take charge of their learning and interests, encouraging them to engage critically with the world around them. It instills a mindset where people see themselves as someone more than capable of tinkering, hacking, and improving designs. Through making, individuals develop confidence, creativity, and a passion for fields like science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, opening up endless possibilities. In these spaces, creativity and skill development flourish. So, how can we expand maker networks to provide broader access to adult learners? To better understand this question, I had the opportunity to engage in various networks like Baltimore Nodes, OpenWorks, Station North Tool Library, and Dent Education to gain a better understanding of what it is like to be a part of, and more importantly, learn from these networks. I did this by conducting surveys to understand people's experiences within these spaces. I asked them about their motivations for joining spaces, their learning methods, and how they share knowledge from others, or share knowledge to others. I also conducted one-on-one interviews with space leaders about their spaces and how they provide access to their community. Additionally, I interviewed new makers to understand their experiences joining networks. I organized group workshops to teach skills for collaborative quilting. This helped me understand the elements needed for a positive learning environment. And finally, I immersed myself in different maker spaces and classes to experience firsthand what is required to learn from and engage within these networks as a new maker. In my research, I identified several key themes, but 3 distinctly stood out to me. First being the lack of cohesion between networks. While individual networks thrive, there is often a disconnect and limited collaboration between them on a broader scale. I noticed that many spaces were offering similar classes, resulting in redundancy. For example, the Station North Tool Library's most popular class, Shop Safety, is consistently booked months in advance, whereas smaller spaces face challenges in attracting participants for their safety classes. Exclusivity in certain spaces. Conversations with different makers revealed significant challenges in finding a compatible network. Many makers recounted having to attend multiple open houses or even paying membership fees to explore different spaces, all in the hopes of gauging whether or not they would fit into a space's social dynamic. Makers also expressed frustration in certain spaces feeling overly commercialized and placing a heavy emphasis on personal gain. A desire for connection and sharing. In these networks, there's a genuine desire to share knowledge and experiences. However, makers encounter obstacles in finding a suitable means to fulfill this desire. Smaller spaces expressed interest in expanding their classes if they had a larger pool of attendees. Likewise, individual makers wanted to share their process to inspire others, but struggled to determine the best methods to do so. These insights shed light on both the strengths and challenges present within the networks and offer many opportunities for improvement. So, as a designer, I now ask myself, what are some ways I can intervene to help the spaces drive a more positive social impact? In order to democratize innovation and provide broader access, intervention is required at a national level. One avenue worth exploring is leveraging public spaces, such as libraries, to expand their facilities and provide more accessible alternatives for individuals who may not have the resources to access maker spaces. While this approach aligns with our overarching goal of broadening access, this intervention would require substantial time and resources to implement, potentially delaying opportunities for immediate engagement amongst aspiring makers. However, a more direct solution is to establish an online public space dedicated to fostering connection and collaboration, drawing from inspiration from successful movements like the open source community and platforms like Mastodon. This platform would follow a decentralized model, meaning it would not be owned by one single organization, and it would not follow an algorithm to control its users. While using this model for an online makerspace could help makers potentially make connections with their communities members within their areas. It could also provide opportunities for spaces to interact with one another and in turn encourage collaboration and knowledge sharing. Increasing space-to-space collaboration could mitigate issues like classroom redundancy. Looking ahead, I hope to continue my work with these networks by bringing these interventions to life and starting usability testing to facilitate better connection. I wanted to extend my deepest gratitude to all the networks that warmly welcomed me into their spaces. Your openness has made this journey truly unforgettable. Thank you for creating an environment where every voice is valued and every idea finds a home. If you would like to continue this conversation with me, I look forward to meeting you guys in the reception. Thank you so much.
Public education in Baltimore isn't doing so well. It seems in every way there's a new headline, but without about it, schools have to fix. So let's change them. Surely, if we get our students, community, administrators, local government, and teachers all on the same page, together we can make things better. Are we solved? Not really. Changes in the educational landscape require great amounts of care, community building, data-backed research, monitoring, along with supportive, equitable policies. So who's going to lead this revolution on the ground? Being on the seat of the people in the classroom, reading papers, making lesson plans, having experiments, and helping to find friends, but they're also the same people who enable all of these changes we want to see behind the scenes and beyond the classroom. The overwhelming amount of work coupled with a system that provides them no way to participate often leaves teachers on the sideline when it comes to improving public education. In spite of being the experts and often the critical link between different stakeholders, teachers' voices and experiences are rarely prioritized. So let us ask ourselves, How might we reinstill teacher voices to co-create public education in Baltimore City?
Before I begin, I would like to give thanks to my own teachers. Your words of encouragement and passion for learning have brought me from Bangalore to Baltimore. Hello, good evening and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining me here as I share my journey. My name is Pallavi. I'm an educator and social designer. The agenda for today's presentation is built on the human-centered design process, but also reflects the absolute chaos that the last 3 months have been. Together, we will explore, engage, examine, and inquire. And just like me, you will also leave with more questions than answers, which is exactly what we need. When I began my capstone, I wanted to understand education in Baltimore, to find my own place in this landscape, and to learn the actual barriers to quality education that students were facing today. Through my initial interviews with key stakeholders like caregivers, teachers, and experts, I saw just a fraction of this reality. From issues of misallocation of funds, poor narratives around city schools, severe lack of personnel, deep-rooted systemic racism, issues around gender and representation, lack of community engagement, social, emotional, and academic learning gaps, outdated assessment systems, and even unsafe school buildings, there seem to be so many problems. But one topic that came up regularly was teachers. We don't have enough teachers, and our teachers don't have enough of anything. So my initial question of how may I help turned into how may I help teachers? In seeking out these answers, I began engaging with different people, environments, and services to find out what were the daily experiences of teachers, what are the challenges that they were facing, and most importantly, what did they need and want? I was fortunate to be able to conduct interviews with teachers, principals, caregivers, paraprofessionals, a union representative, and other experts in this field. Their stories and wisdom have been central to this work. I would like to sincerely thank them all for their time and energy. I was further able to connect with other organizations doing amazing work. The wonderful faculty at MA teaching in MICA, the radiant founders of Be More Transform, and the revolutionary folk at Edifying Teachers have all been essential in providing insights and connecting me to others across the city. The formative work by the Fund for Educational Excellence's study on teacher retention in Baltimore has helped guide this project through vast research and key data. I was also able to be part of conversations around improving Baltimore's education, like a meet and greet for the 100% project and a leadership panel under Morgan State's NSEED, both initiatives working to improve the future of education in Baltimore. And finally, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the wonderful staff and teachers at Gardner Elementary, my volunteer school. They welcomed me into their school, where I got a glimpse of the passion, commitment, and love that drives every teacher every day. I built that shelf for a teacher, so that she didn't have to. The findings from my research cover a variety of challenges that teachers face. Through the synthesis of this data, I wanted to highlight what teachers were seeing, hearing, and feeling, while also identifying patterns across the board. Here are my findings. Teachers have unsustainable workloads. On average, teachers were working 60 hours a week, with most time spent on duties aside from teaching-related work. A lot of their time is actually unaccounted for, not including time taken for certifications and learning necessary to continue teaching. And the school year varies with workload, with some periods being more stressful than others. Teachers are severely underpaid. For their qualification and work, teachers are paid significantly less than peers in their field. They also see a lack of incentives. The righteousness of their role is often used as an excuse for the lack of fair pay. Teachers are burnt out. Dealing with the emotional challenges of their students took a toll on their mental health. And because of their workload and lack of resources,
they rarely receive the required support to heal. Add to this the decision fatigue that teachers face, and you've got the perfect recipe for stress. Like one of my interviewees said, it was like being in air traffic control for 6 hours straight. For teachers, having supportive school staff was crucial. Teachers need and want to be in a team where they feel safe and trusted. And they want staff who are empathetic, active listeners. Lastly, teachers noted a clear barrier between themselves and those in power. They do not see an alignment between their classrooms and the values of their leaders at different levels. They feel disconnected from the educational ecosystem as all the work happens in pockets with little to no cross-communication. They feel unheard by those in power, never seeing the effect of feedback and rarely consulted for changes that they need to implement. In spite of these conditions, the one bright spot for all teachers was their commitment to their students. Across schools, neighborhoods, and backgrounds, teachers in Baltimore say that their self-worth and contentment comes from their students. They want to be able to provide for them. They feel inspired by their energy and positive outlook, and they prioritize bonding with their students and their families, recognizing the importance of these ties. These insights reveal pertinent issues that directly affect teachers, but they are the result of much larger systemic issues within our public education that are very deeply intertwined and difficult to dismantle. So what can we do now, and how do we do it? This led me to begin my inquiry. I wanted to envision more systemic change that didn't add another thing to a teacher's to-do list. We could start by prioritizing the health of our teachers. Healthy teachers create healthy classrooms that build healthy schools. Who is a healthy teacher? A healthy teacher has their basic needs met by their school and staff. They feel true to themselves and experience a sense of belonging in their environments. They feel dignified in all of their work and are appreciated for it. And most importantly, they're empowered by agency instilled in themselves. 2, we need a system that we can trust. The current educational system has a unidirectional flow, both of action and reaction, with key decisions being made behind closed doors. We must push for Baltimore's education system to model transparency and accountability in order to reestablish trust with teachers and enable them to participate. Through accessible data that translates the working of the district for the teachers, through opportunities for participation where teacher voices are central in defining decisions, and through efficient communication that is better able to mobilize and connect teachers to the right resources. My insights today are not really news. Teachers' rights and issues have long been ignored in spite of intense advocacy, and it is time for a shift. The future of education requires radical care, passionate commitment, and a bottoms-up approach that utilizes community knowledge like that of our teachers. This project is just a tiny step in that direction, towards an empathetic, empowering, equitable education for all. Thank you. Break time.
Hi, so we're going to have a brief break, about 5 minutes or so. So feel free to stand up, stretch, don't go too far.
So the screen is off, but if you just like put your finger on
Clearer and more disgusting than to listen to.
Okay, good. Of all times, and it's coming up.
years-long lawsuits.
How about now?
Okay.
All good, great.
I'd like you to close your eyes and imagine a person leaving prison. Who do you see? Consider their age, the color of their skin, their clothing. What about their gender? It's likely you pictured a man, but you're not alone. Our criminal legal system operates under the same bias. Women constitute the fastest growing group behind bars, disproportionately affecting Black and Brown individuals. Despite the long-standing trend, institutional support primarily caters to men. This gap in gender-informed care perpetuates debilitating cycles of female incarceration. Legal-related care systems have overlooked women for years. In Maryland, gendered patterns of sexual violence, parental obligations, mental illness, and substance abuse remain largely neglected by state pre- and post-release initiatives. In fact, the Maryland Department of Corrections currently maintains 9 pre-release facilities for men while offering none for women. 0. These barriers exist by design. Women are incarcerated, victimized, under-resourced, and re-incarcerated in predictable sequence. The cycle is most aggressive here in Baltimore, evidenced by decades of generational oppression. So how do we support our most vulnerable in a system built to reproduce harm? We begin with compassion. To invest in understanding one another is to invest in caring for one another. When we acknowledge the unique experiences of incarcerated women, we can more effectively assess their needs, hopes, and boundless potential. So I invite you to ask, how might we break cycles of incarceration for women in Baltimore? Hello, everyone. My name is Ruth Maestas, and I want to thank you all in person and online sincerely for being here tonight. The stigma against incarcerated people cuts deep into our social psyche. Behind wired fences and concrete walls, people on the outside often internalize the distance between them and us. But really, it's a matter of we. Prison isn't as far as some of us may think. If you shift just a few social, economic, or personal circumstances in any of our lives, we'd likely encounter the carceral system too. I want you to challenge these biases as we consider the women at the heart of this issue. These women are resilient, they are capable, and they deserve our attention. With that, welcome to my capstone. Over the past few years, I've become increasingly passionate about justice for incarcerated people. Like any institution, our criminal legal system is an intentional design. I believe the intention is to harm and oppress more than it is to serve and protect. This is especially true in Baltimore, where despite comprising only 9% of the state's population, the city accounts for 40% of people in Maryland prisons. I knew my work started here. At the beginning of my research, I noticed a significant lack of information about incarcerated women, and this indicates a bigger problem. How are we providing meaningful support for these women if we can't even see them? It became clear that incarcerated women are an afterthought in an already oppressive structure. Our criminal legal system regularly prioritizes the needs of men. The gap in gender-specific care is most evident in prison pre-release and reentry programs. Comprehensive reentry care is essential to the health and wellness of returning citizens in a larger functional society. Without adequate support upon release,
women are drastically more likely to experience cycles of incarceration. Whether behind bars or on the outside, the patriarchy is alive and well. So I had my first objective. I was going to understand these women and their place in the carceral system. Then I got really humbled really fast. Understanding the complexities of female incarceration is a huge undertaking. It turns out the more you look at a problem, the messier it gets. Luckily, I wasn't alone. Over the past few months, I've been able to connect with an incredible network of people working to support Baltimore's incarcerated women. I learned from field experts, including reentry practitioners, volunteers, formerly incarcerated people, and prison justice advocates. I'd especially like to thank the folks at Pivot, Hope Baltimore, Return Home Baltimore, Marion House, and the Maryland Justice Project, with special thanks to Veronica, Ashley, and Antoine. These individuals graciously offered their time, insights, and energy to help create this project. Words cannot express my gratitude to each and every one of them. Through one-on-one observations, through one-on-one interviews, program observations, community events, volunteer work, and one national conference, I gained a better understanding of the obstacles prison-impacted women in Baltimore face today. I even assisted at Pivot's prom for reentry program graduates. In a capstone that often felt bleak, it was heartening to see the overwhelming joy surrounding these women and their accomplishments. There's no amount of research that could answer all my questions, but this is your program, so I had to look back at my data. Here's what I learned. 1, in Maryland, incarcerated women experience barriers that are significant and distinct from those of incarcerated men. In prison-impacted populations, women have greater difficulty in obtaining and sustaining employment, higher rates of physical and sexual abuse, and were more likely to cope with the co-occurring mental health and substance abuse disorders than men. But here's the most crucial barrier. The first thing to know about these women is that most of them are mothers. Nearly every person I spoke with emphasized the prevalence of motherhood among incarcerated women, and it's statistically proven nationwide. 58% of all women in US prisons are mothers. Most incarcerated mothers are also the primary caretakers of their children, who, in turn, are more likely to encounter prison themselves. This trend perpetuates gendered and generational cycles of incarceration. 2, these barriers are gendered and therefore require gender-informed solutions. Traditional reentry models offer returning citizens support in employment, housing, financial literacy, and educational opportunities. These are essential resources for anyone leaving prison, but they aren't enough for most women. Services prioritizing family reunification, substance abuse and addiction treatment, self-empowerment principles, trauma-informed therapy, and individualized case management. Sorry. Oh, Lord. Okay. And individualized case management provide more intentional care for women leaving prison. The benefits of these programs are undeniable. Here in Baltimore, women who completed Pivot's specialized program were significantly less likely to be arrested than those who did not. Lastly, current state prison mandates and typical reentry programs fail to address the specific needs of incarcerated women. Maryland prisons have a major problem. Across the state, there are currently 0 pre-release facilities for women. Despite legislative progress through the Gender Responsive Pre-Release Act, which requires the Maryland DOC to build a community-based pre-release facility for women, political opponents are systemically withholding project funding. These centers play a crucial role in successful reentry, offering individuals temporary leave to obtain outside employment, generate income, and visit their families at home. In Maryland, this support is being actively denied to incarcerated women, and it's causing major harm. So where do we go from here? First, we move forward together. Everything I've shared with you today, I learned directly from people in Baltimore who are already doing the work. My passion for supporting incarcerated women is reflected tenfold by the legacy of my community partners. I'm only at the very beginning of my journey, but I'd like to share one possible intervention. The idea is inspired by Louisiana's The First 72+ organization, popular for its rapid intervention within the first 3 days of release, a decisive period in preventing reincarceration. Without the support of a pre-release facility, these first 3 days are even more critical for Maryland women. But what if it didn't have to be that way? How might cycles of incarceration change if women in Baltimore were offered a similar program, but through a gendered perspective? Imagine the impact of a gender-responsive support team, a collective of family reunification professionals, medical practitioners, case managers, therapists, life coaches, and formerly incarcerated peers who could connect each woman with the resources. These women will receive adjusted care plans reflecting their physical and mental health status. No woman turned away, no woman left behind. But this is just one potential solution to a problem with many different answers. The work is collaborative, and everyone plays a role. Today, I've outlined a narrative surrounding women in prison, but they aren't the only ones at risk. Prisons hurt everyone. The consequences of the system reverberate across men, women, families, neighborhoods, and our overall societal health. Part of our job as social designers is to identify, evaluate, and question systems of oppression. We aim to work with communities to challenge harmful institutions and imagine more equitable futures. In short, social design is an abolitionist practice. Reentry care can be an abolitionist practice. And asking hard questions is an abolitionist practice. As you listen to all of our work today, I'd like you to keep this close. We should all be harsher on systems and softer on one another. Thank you.
Ever thought about what it's like to live in a world that wasn't designed with you in mind? In the United States, approximately 61 million adults live with disability, which is 1 in 4 people who frequently are excluded by inaccessibility. Disabilities are commonly perceived as an individual's personal challenge, disregarding the barriers erected by society. Our opinion on disability is shaped by mainstream medical model, which disregards challenges individuals experience navigating through environments or services not designed for them. People with disability have developed several models opposing these prevailing notions. To abolish ableism, embracing a social perspective towards disability enables exploring personal experiences beyond all superficial solutions. Inaccessibility is a vicious cycle permeating our society that further stigmatizes invisible disabilities. Are we intentionally neglecting those who may not meet us, or are we genuinely meeting everyone where they are? Every action we take creates a ripple that impacts an ecosystem of people with different abilities. Therefore, I ask us today to reassess our beliefs about disability and tackle the question: how can we reconstruct disability frameworks to ensure equitable inclusion?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for your presence and patience this evening. I'm Swathi, an interdisciplinary designer with a background in architecture, where I was first introduced to disability standards as a guiding framework. Throughout my journey, I found myself in situations where aesthetic design principles were prioritized, yet there was a consistent oversight in considering diverse abilities as a fundamental aspect. Today, I want to highlight the potential for positive change in how we approach inclusivity and the idea of a future for people with all abilities. We often overlook disparities until they directly impact us or our loved ones. Exclusion is a plague that manifests in many forms, such as physical barriers, social stigma, unequal treatment, and limited access to resources and opportunities. First things first, let's look at a few key terminologies to keep in mind for all of our future interactions. Either a people-first or identity-first language reduces dehumanizing effect and increases celebrating disability. Accommodation implies a sort of permission, something granted to another person. Inclusion is a state of mind to adopt, What I perceive as inclusion is both being able to involve myself completely and feeling empowered. This translates to both how worthy and dignified I feel during my experiences within a premise, navigating a service, or while using a product. I've been exploring different stages of design research in the last few months. Let's look at a few intersections that cause tension for people with disability while interacting with society. Changing narrative is a form of sowing seeds to fostering and nurturing a safe future. Within the social space of creating an impact towards equitable disability inclusion, let's look at a few tiers of life cycle changes. It is essential to ignite hope, instill confidence in all our abilities, and leave no one behind, while constantly addressing anxiety, safe spaces for overall wellness, and creating better access. To functionally implement all of the above, it's rudimentary to consider how can we save time by simplifying inclusion, which can be integrated easily, forming new connections and appealing to a variety of abilities. I began my research by examining gaps within disability that I had been noticing in forms of disparities, stigma, and established standards. This eventually led to the formation of a phenomenon. Why do people with disabilities lack inclusive experiences and access? And ideally, what if we make intentional decisions that normalize equal and inclusive opportunities for all able and people with disability to thrive together equally? This ideal state gave rise to a few guiding questions. How can holistic decision-making show care and inclusive decision markers for people with disabilities? How do we identify and eradicate the gaps in our current system that are preventing people with various abilities to achieve their full potential? I dove deeply into research, from reading about inequality in space of disability, understanding frameworks, and in-person valuable experiences that both taught and made me iterate about perceiving different abilities. The following communities of individuals and organizations have made it their everyday mission to not overlook any persons with disability and are equally, if not more passionate, about making the world an equal platform. This cluster represents people I interacted to learn about their research and academic interventions. A highlighted barrier was how our public benefit system is not person-centered. The ARC, an organization constantly supporting people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, have been a strong backbone in this project. If our decisions are comfortable, then we probably haven't talked to enough people. I would like to take a moment to express my heartfelt gratitude to everyone who contributed to this shared capstone goal. Everybody has a right to communicate and a right to voice. Art in many forms has shown up in the movement for disability justice through the lens of discrimination in viewing, engaging, and making. A major theme that I kept revisiting during my research phases was museum visits with the art support that formed my most fondest and enriching experience. These pictures capture enthusiasm, joy, and involvement to learn and make art that's a representation of their unique ability. Further on, being within the arts premise and observing what a typical day looks like cemented how integral art-making activities was, while ensuring equal choice to engage or not on a given day. I also gravitated to understanding an alternative community model that is driving an innovative edge by being the shoulder to lean on at times when society wasn't paving accessible pathways. This model anchored on empowering adults with equal choice in the community while ensuring reintegration at their own pace and celebrating the strengths every single day. Through intentional accountability, choice, and dignity, this clubhouse model is an inspiration. With all of the above interactions, few noticeable reflections were driven by how an outlook influences our encounters. Our trust to learn before assuming, while going beyond the barriers that we see and looking for inspiration in all other interventions. Bringing you all back to my research question, how can we reconstruct disability frameworks to ensure equitable inclusion? With generous data to synthesize, I started looking for similar patterns of problems, gaps, and challenges that a person with disability faces consistently. Making sense of needs and strengths while comprehensively understanding who or what are the points of barriers. A few key dialogues during my sense making where type of discrimination is different for each kind of disability. I shared the spirit of disruption within us, inclusive for people with disabilities beyond checking boxes of compliance. Out of the numerous insights, I decided to hone in on a few that showed up consistently. A major one is how American Disability Act, even though a significant stride, doesn't capture social barriers within disability. With rising voices supporting people with disabilities, unfortunately, accessibility is predominantly a last thought. Our bias about disability or person with disability plays a huge role that disrupts behavioral patterns. Decisions about and for people with disability doesn't include them as an integral part of the process. Following insights, I started translating them to micro themes, where topics of conversation where inclusion was found to be an issue for people with disabilities. These were within the spheres of decision-making, spatial divide, equal representation, services and experiences, and navigational tools within the systems. A rapid phase of ideation with themes to explore led to numerous short-term and long-term ideas, while constantly anchoring onto the ideology of designing for one and extending for many. Now let's talk about what inclusive design over universal design and what I would like to emphasize through this. There is no typical persona or typical person with disability. Instead of only referencing standards, inclusive design encourages looking at the cases of exclusion. Instead of focusing on impairment, let us focus on connections among people. Voids the narrative of commonality and understands disability exclusion can happen in both visible and invisible contexts. Going through a design process was essential for me to look for more intersections within communities, methods to co-create, feasibility of the concepts, and also how do we future-proof what we are creating today. Hence, what I thought would eventually place me at a stage to suggest recommendations. Actually, scratch that. How can we all contribute towards taking small steps with leaps of hope towards equitable inclusion? To sustain an idea is to early on shifting our mindsets by including diverse abilities of people during decision-making, which might take longer, but will drive decisions that are long-term. Moving beyond accommodations, creating spaces to belong by asking before assuming and being intentional and not just reasonable. As I currently pause to reflect on how starting to design for disability with belonging and inclusion as a valuable asset empowers people to perform without feeling stigmatized. If ignorance is allied with power, it will fuel inequality in our society. Therefore, let us pair empathy and humility as our greatest allies. The willingness to listen, learn, and empathize with diverse needs and experiences of people with disability is instrumental in shaping our approach and guiding our efforts. As we continue to move forward, let's demand and expect more of ourselves and deliver more for others, regardless of ability, so that they can all participate, contribute, and thrive together. Thank you.
Empowerment can be defined in many ways. If we look it up in the dictionary, it says that it is the act of granting power to someone to perform an action. However, the idea that power is something that can be given implies it can be taken away. Is power something people have the agency to give and take from others? I disagree. Empowerment is a personal journey that looks different for every culture, community, and especially for every person. It is a foundation for personal growth that benefits not only the individual, but creates a pathway for future generations to follow and benefits communities as a whole. Finding one's empowerment can be a challenge, especially in a city where power and community investment are distributed unevenly based on factors such as income, race, culture, and identity. Baltimore is not only black and white. The population in the city is getting more diverse as it grows, with its fastest growing population being Latinos and Latinas. Latinx power is strong and standing, And one of the sturdiest pillars holding its spine are the resilient generations of women who have paved the way to push against systems and barriers to claim their rightful place in Baltimore. What are we doing to intentionally create spaces and systems that actively include and connect Latinas with each other? And how can we strengthen these connections to promote growth and empowerment among Latinas and their communities?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, everyone who's in person and whoever is joining us online. My name is Elisa Alarcón, and today you will be joining me as we uncover the findings of my research, exploring the intersection between empowerment and identity across borders and across generations. So let's start from the beginning. Where are my Latinas at? Thank you. Thank you. As you can see, some of us are here. But you will find so many more at Hylton Town in Southeast Baltimore, where thank you to my community partners at the Salem United Methodist Church, I had the amazing opportunity to meet and talk to incredible accomplished women. They are community leaders, they are creative problem solvers, they are avid learners, committed hard workers, and they're resilient household caretakers. To approach this project, I used different research methods, starting with immersive experiences at the church, where every Friday at 11 a.m., make sure to write that down, they do an amazing job by welcoming dozens of community members to get connected to some resources they might need or just grab some food to take back home. I also did observation at the cultural center right next to the church, where they host art galleries on a monthly basis, showcasing Latinx artists, and they're just open to the public. I also reached out at community events, doing some digital surveys to get the input from some first-generation Latinas in the area who were kind enough to share their stories with me, as well as interviews with community leaders, advocates, and community members. Now, this process helped me collect stories, findings, and overall data that led to the 4 insights I'm going to share with you tonight. Number 1, 1 in every 3 Latinas reported an experience of sexual abuse. Number 2, if language is power, speaking is empowerment. And let me just say that again. Where language is power, speaking up is empowerment. Language barriers remain an issue. The Latina immigrants that don't speak English, they go through major communication issues as they try to settle in a new country. They also face a series of challenges as they try to learn the language. On the other hand, we have first-generation Latinas that hesitate to either learn or preserve their parents' first language, let's say Spanish, as they grow up. Now, this builds up a significant communication gap between generations. With family being as important as it is for Latin American cultures, we have grandkids simply not being able to talk to their grandparents. And this connects to my next insight, which is that school, society, and public spaces are not doing enough to welcome and include Latinx diversity. First-generation Latinas grow up being pushed to tailor their identities, where staying true to this part of their culture means getting bullied, and it means getting racialized. And number 4, excuse me, lack of representation and accessibility all across the city. As you saw it here today, we are here. Now, at the core of my research, there was empowerment. At the core of my research, there was empowerment. And here are the 3 key points that I'm going to share with you about empowerment. To begin with, it looks different from place to place, as it looks different from woman to woman. And as we play different roles in society, depending on our context, it will look different from place to place. Number 2, as Latin American people migrate, we bring our cultures and our beliefs, often as well carrying our gender bias and gender stereotypes that are still tied to Latin American cultures. Now, as a result of this, we have first-generation Latinas growing up among not only one set of cultural gender bias and stereotypes, but two, right? The one coming from Latin American cultures, plus the one that is inevitably embedded in the society of the United States. And number three, before I tell you where empowerment is grounded, let me tell you what it is not. So it is not about romanticizing the idea of accomplishing your goals and pursuing your dreams, right? Making a vision board. That's not what it is. Empowerment for Latinas in Baltimore comes from resilience. It comes from overcoming obstacles, one after the other. From challenging gender biased beliefs that can be often tied to families, and from pushing through violence and racism. Now, this right here is power. And this is power that has brought our community all the way here. But how can we add to this conversation? On the individual level, what Latinas can do is continue to speak up. Speak up in English, speak up in Spanish, habla en Spanglish, speak up with an accent, speak up in Portuguese, but continue to speak up. And for community members, engage. Listen not to respond, listen to engage, listen to add more to this conversation. On a larger scale, for neighborhoods and community spaces, provide funding for organizations that promote cultural events, like Caliente, a queer Latinx dance party hosted right across the street at the Motor House on a monthly basis, and Nuestras Raíces with their annual parade called Fiesta Baltimore, celebrating culture and promoting connections. On an even larger scale, ensure access to education, healthcare, and legal services for Latina immigrants and Latino population, like Latino Health Initiative, providing foods for every family and for every person, and Adelante Latina, supporting Latina youth to achieve higher education. On an even bigger picture, support Latinas entrepreneurs, small businesses, and local alliances. And across Baltimore, invest in community-led development for Latinx neighborhood, as well as for Highland Town. Now, at the Center for Social Design, we follow theories of change, and I want to share mine with you tonight. This is only one way to benefit the transition of Latina immigrants as they establish in Baltimore. It increases their odds to step in their power and continue to represent an expanding population that contributes to the city's collective growth. Being connected to women that paved the way before them increases as well the odds of first-generation Latinas to have a strong representation to look up to, continuing to raise their voices, giving back to their communities, and adding up to an inclusive, flourishing, and diverse Baltimore. Now, there's so much more to build. Our conversation today only outlines a series of resources Latinas can have to thrive in their power. But furthermore, the next steps of these projects will continue to collect experiences, stories, and ways of expression that represent the diverse population of Latinas in Baltimore, their needs, their voices, and their truths. Muchas gracias.
So thanks, y'all. That's the presentation portion of the evening. So we're going to take a little bit of a break and we're going to get set up for the moderated discussion to come in about 5-ish minutes. So give us a few minutes, but feel free to take a break and join us back here soon. Thanks.
Meredith, towards you, you guys can meet the students. All right, so I'm gonna start us off. From such vast topics, how did you guys choose the ones you landed on?
Years ago, I saw the roots of what was going on in this country. You know, it starts with the
Sorry.
Jews.
There we go. Got it, got it. Just listen to them while I fix the tech.
Okay, let me share a little bit of my experience. So to choose my topic, I've worked before with gender perspective and with designing gender informed systems and strategies to address social problems, right? So with that previous experiences, when I came to Baltimore, I knew that I wanted to design for women in Baltimore. I just didn't know which women, who or where they were, right? So I started looking into the population, looking where I could be helpful and where I could be resourceful as well. And I mean, I am Latina, right? So I was very lucky to find my community in Hylton. And when I did, I knew that that's the place where I needed to, where I needed to just base my research and my whole project. And I experienced Baltimore as well. So that's for me.
I want you to remind us a little bit backwards.
I'm concerned about America.
Sorry. Okay. I originally wanted to talk about capitalism, but that's a really big, it's a big topic. And there's so many issues that kind of stem from capitalism as a whole. And diving more into my research and being pushed by a large amount of people, I started to look at one of the most monetized assets within our community, which is knowledge. And that's kind of how I settled on maker spaces and innovation.
And following the guidelines in terms of space that I was essential, but we've always done is to do a box check so that the project will move forward. I guess I was quite confused about what was being left out for a very long time that I was in practice. And coming into the ground was kind of focusing on what was being left behind, which is the invisible space, invisibility, which is driving
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, for me, I came into the program, really wanting to explore, criminal legal reform, and, I feel pretty passionately about prison abolition, but I had to look at the work that was being done here in Baltimore. And even that was a really, really wide scope. And it wasn't until I came across a article online speaking about queer people's and women's experiences in prison that I even realized how different their journeys in the carceral system looked. And then I was really lucky to find Pivot Baltimore, which is the only women's reentry program in Baltimore, and they do really, really incredible work, and I just felt like I needed to pursue that area. I'm glad I did.
So for me, in my presentation, I kind of gave you guys a background of how I started this work. As far as the topic, I kind of pulled from things that I saw when we were implementing the restorative practices in Hampton, and noticed that they were still happening here. And I also have a friend who's working on restorative work on the national level. We should agree that it's topic across the board. With the so that is what it's.
But I really didn't, when I even just like a few, when we, 2 months ago, I was still stuck on what do I do, because I'm talking to all of these people just around the education. There's just so many things that everybody's all the time. I didn't know what to do and how to organize it. And then when my friends stopped me to put everything on someone important, like there seems to be this one issue that you have a lot of information on. Why don't you start looking at that?
No, that's, oh, and also I'm a student here, so I'm the NASD 24 student. So I'm part of the cohort, so I kind of think a little bit of insider perspective behind the work that's going on. And yes, all that was exceedingly comprehensive. But I also want to say that we, as the audience, got to see how clean it was. But even thinking the process, so many ups and downs, and things that could pop up and changes that we all need. And to distill it down and present it so clean is an art in of itself. So great job on that. And we're going to move on to our next session we got here. What are the things that didn't fit into the presentation that are still important to share?
So many insights that would have been, if I had more time, like 5 minutes, would have been great to share. I think also, given the time, sharing prototyping a little bit more and why I came to the ideas, why and all that.
Well, yeah, in my case, speaking about Latina empowerment in Baltimore, definitely a bunch of stuff that I couldn't include in my presentation was resources. All of the resources that already exist, that are laid out, that people are often not aware that they are. And just with mapping, speaking about these pathways of empowerment, I am also mapping out these stories, how to get from point A to point B in a place, navigating in a country, right? So that's something that I'm looking forward to including in my publication.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. I just thought of my answer. So I was looking at when you're looking at, someone's experience in the carceral system, the way that I understand it best is looking at, what their life looks like before, prison, while in prison, and after prison. And that's a huge narrative to try and fit into 10 minutes. So I really only focused on, kind of a little bit what happens right before people are released, women are released, and what their life looks like after. But if I had the time, I would have really liked to lay out the groundwork for, how these women end up being incarcerated in the first place, what kind of systemic oppressions are working against them, and then also the inequities that exist in prisons themselves, because those are very vast. But yeah, there's just so much to share about it that you could never share enough about the topic.
For me, I would say that I wish that I could have highlighted my partners more. I would love to stress how wonderful their work is, but I knew that in a 10-minute time period, I would not be able to respect the honor that kind of lost over them. So really, if you guys want to learn anything about restorative work happening in Baltimore, I'd say one of the two places to seek out first are my friends at Restorative Response Baltimore over there and the Baltimore chapter of the Wisdom Project.
I would say, I definitely think I would have wanted to in this every person's name and see how they contribute to this. The other thing that I really wanted to include was just how populated the education landscape in Baltimore is, especially in terms of interventions. If you can imagine a place where you can be to improve a child's education, it is happening already in Baltimore. There are multiple people working on it in schools, outside schools, in community centers, and rec centers, everywhere that it is possible to intervene with parents, teachers, students, administrators, in the district, everywhere. There are lots of people working on it. So I think that was something that I would love to like show to the world, just that sheer volume of people who are coming to improve this one thing.
Which was even broad topic, and everything was all learning as to how to improve that in what I was learning. I wish I could talk to more people with different experiences as well. That kind of has given me why it should be a problem space where I felt like I could get every day, which is a connected effort that I'm trying to save for this project. And that's something I really wish I had more insights on, where people are facing problems beyond just because of any different safety. So much more sections of problems in the system.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to turn it to you guys. You guys have a question you're sitting on. I know you have a question you want to ask. Raise your hand. You do or no?
I'm curious about, I'm curious about something you may have heard or heard from your research that surprised you in a way that's
After you're in an uncomfy position.
I'm just gonna interpret that and. Yeah, and this is something that I shared on my presentation. It was my first insight. And it's that 1 in every 3 Latinas reported an experience of sexual abuse. Now, this is not a finding that I could take to the next level, right? I'm focusing in empowerment and my research, even though it takes into consideration that insight is focused on living on a different path. However, that it's still there, it still happened, and it was very funny. Well, not funny clearly, but it was very just right? Because I got that information, and when I was sharing it with my cohort, one of my peers was saying like, oh yeah, actually 1 in every 3 women suffer an experience of sexual abuse, and I was like, yeah, literally, like I have it here in the data. So I think that was the insight that to me was more of the whole thing.
Something that I learned that was really disappointing and sad, I guess, was just understanding how many women in prison are mothers, that the majority of women in prisons are mothers. I did not realize that it was literally more than half. And that's devastating. And also I think it was difficult then to open up, you know, looking at not just gendered cycles of incarceration, but also like throughout families as well. And how this is affecting children with parents who are incarcerated, And then also just like the overall health of communities, you know, when you remove women who are the backbones of their neighborhoods, of the blocks, you know, for other families, like that really, that reverberates and it makes like a significant difference when these women aren't there. So yeah, that was difficult to learn.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that, talking about teachers, like the things that happen in schools, it just stays with them, like, other than students passing. Students being. Like, you may think that, oh, it's just one of 30 students or a teacher's class for 1 year, but then, like, you know, it's just like these people are just passing through the students, teachers are getting another one. But the way these teachers spoke about students that they've seen going through different situations like 14 years ago, it's just it's bad.
So we just finished up our most recent state legislative assembly session. And a lot of that policy work tends to be very left-brained, analytical, very siloed, unfortunately. And I think the way you all presented these challenges from a rehumanized perspective and more through creative storytelling, thinking about how these challenges can be approached more coherently. Just wondering your thoughts as we think ahead perhaps to next legislative assembly or just policy making in general. For those of all of us in the room who want to be those instigators and advocates, how the power of the approach that you all demonstrated this evening might be brought to bear to advance policy more productively in the future.
That's a really fantastic question. Everybody here confirmed with that. But in response to your question, I think that like the core of our work with social designers is turning first to people with lived experience and people working directly with issues. I attended the National Conference for Returning Citizens, and one of the quotes that I heard that was really, really impactful was the people who are closest to the solutions, or wait, excuse me, let me start over. The people that are closest to the problem are closest to the solution, but furthest from the resources to do so. So I think pulling in people with lived experience who are working on the ground with the issues at hand is really impactful for gaining crucial insight that you just would never learn if you didn't go on to communities to speak to people.
Also, the various lived experiences, not something which how people do access, and then going beyond and reaching out to people and trying to identify problem spaces, which what we don't see on surface level. Honestly, being intentional about changes. Also, unit is not doing it for parents, but doing it for ourselves as well. A problem can affect any one of us at any lifetime. So having that inclusive mindset to have the I don't have any decision yet. That the power of same thing. Yes, saying about people and how can these games that are kind of fluctuating between
or those in power and those who need power, how can these leaders strengthen and how can we to them and transmit to the language that they know is more acceptable within their community. So I'm hoping that through our work we are able to facilitate that.
One more question. I was going to hop on that question because it's like so great. I feel like one of the major things that is super easy for us to define community because we can kind of find our field, define our social problem, our community is right there. We as social designers can we have to step out to sort of do this work, but stepping out, but finding the connection that we're still in is paramount. Because as soon as you step out and you become like an anthropologist, or you have this sort of immersive mindset that if you have that, then you can start thinking of yourself, which can be problematic if you try to engage with your community and they're like, oh, you are, this is a performance, this is you becoming something for me. When you are able to define your community, whether that be within the assembly or what you're advocating for within the policy, that will really probably enable you to just become a social designer in the way that you do the research. And I feel like there's a lot of like technical jargon that can be still reapplied because it's just a process that can be reiterated. So I feel like if you're defining your community, then you can start to kind of get that research, the qualitative data, the insights from interviews, talking, and then develop that community even more by considering those values. Yeah, amazing.
Question over here. First of all, great job on the presentation. It's excellent. And each one of you had a particular topic that you touched on. You did an excellent job with it. But I know you journeyed through this experience as a cohort. So my question is, what are some of the connection points between the different topics and presentations? Did you see some intersections in the work that you all did?
Well, I would say, just a word in general that would probably sum up all of our work is something to I think we've all done.
Yeah, I was gonna follow that up. I think all of us, despite it being our own personal projects, we all kind of went along the journey together. We worked on our projects together and we advised and critiqued together. So we all kind of went along this journey and learned things that we might not necessarily learn if we worked as individuals. As well as some of us had pretty close ties on topics. Me and Pallavi were together a lot of the time, trying to work out different things that we both were finding within our own fields of our subjects. Similar to Ruth and Meredith, if you want to touch on that.
Yeah, well, like Sydney said, I think there's a little bit of all of us in each of our presentations. I really wouldn't have been able to do this without the support of my cohort and our professors. And yeah, there's not much more I can say about that, but between me and Meredith, I think that our work is very similar in the sense that it, as in restorative justice work and like reentry care, and just taking a closer look at the carceral system as it reimagines an established institution and thinks about what else it could be, how else it could look, and I think it questions how we approach punishment and I think again the same goes for all of us. I think we're all looking at larger systems through like focus, like empathetic lens on the people. Yeah, so I think that there's a strong through line between all of our work.
I think also add that during a lot of the points where we were sharing just each other, even though our topics may have been different, I think our schools of thought and the daily shouldn't really like influence each other. Because I remember thinking about the way I think was thinking about empowerment and kind of trying not to think about empowerment because she didn't feel right about being the to define power for someone else. And then when I was thinking about that for myself, I was like, that's how teachers, and nobody should be telling teachers how to be a good teacher. They know how to do that. And teachers need to like let them do it. But I think similarly, like with every conversation that we have, I think like first of all, I feel like we're always awe of each other's work, but also the way each person makes their own creative perspective to every topic is such a unique takeaway for us as listeners to then apply to our own work, so that now it's just a big work.
Beautiful words that end on full of words. Thank you so much for offering time to us today. Listening to these wonderful presenters and social designers. Thank you, MASD 2024. We will see you guys at the reception afterward. You can clap these ones out.
Can I offer a few more uplifts and some more gratitude? This concludes the auditorium portion. Okay. We want to thank you for supporting our amazing students. Number one. Thank you to family and friends who literally make this possible. Thank you to all our partners in Baltimore and beyond for your trust, support, openness, and understanding. There is so much extraordinary work being done by really extraordinary people. Tremendous gratitude and love to our fierce MASD alumni, many of whom are here, and also a special shout out to future MASD students in the next year's class. There are a few brave folks that made it here tonight and online. To my dear Pickett Slater Harrington. Thank you, Pickett. Our visiting faculty, artists and designers, our fantastic partners in MICA product design, fantastic students. Thank you to Sydney and Ruth for screen printing workshop, to Shannon for getting us here. Doing the really heavy lifting to make all the presentations work, really. Thank you, Tony, for photography tonight. Thanks to our dear colleagues in grad studies and grad admissions for critical support and leadership. And can we please give one last round of applause to our great folks here, the MASD students. One more round of applause for this. So we're going to be in the MASD studio, which if you go out this door and take a left, look for the blue wall that says Center for Social Design. We're going to have refreshments. We can have informal conversations. Come hang out. Okay. Thank you all very much.
I don't know where these go. So
oh, yeah. Are they off?
That one's off, yeah.
Off.
Isaac. One second, I'm just going to. That's sweet.